Auzu billahi minash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu alaikum, boys and girls, watchers, viewers. Today we are taking up a new lesson by the name of Dusk. This lesson is by Victor Hughes Munro. तो इसका पेन नेम इसने रखा है साकी. We will not go into the details of the writer, but we will directly move to the story itself. I'll read it for you and then we will discuss. Okay? Well, the story begins with this name, Norman Godspeed. Well, I'll read it out for you. Norman Godspeed sat on a bench in the park at around 30 minutes past 6 on an early March evening, and dusk had fallen heavily over the scene. There was a wide emptiness over the roads and sidewalks, and yet there were many figures moving silently through the half-light, dotted unobtrusively on bench and chair, scarcely to be distinguished from the shadowed gloom in which they sat. The scene pleased Godspeed and harmonized with his present mood. Dusk, to his mind, was the hour of defeat. Men and women who had fought and lost, who hid their fallen fortunes and dead hopes as far as possible from the scrutiny of curious, came forth in this hour of gloom, when their shabby clothes and bowed shoulders and unhappy eyes might pass unnoticed, or at any rate unrecognized. A king that's conquered must see strange looks, so bitter a thing is the heart of man. The wanderers in the dusk did not choose to have strange looks fastened on them. Therefore they came out in this bad fashion. Beyond the sheltering scenes of bush and palings came a realm of brilliant lights and noisy, rushing traffic, marking the haunts of those other people who held the steering of life in their own hands and did not give up so easily. So God's best imagination picture of things. He sat on his bench in almost deserted walk. He was in the mood to count himself among the defeated. Money trouble did not press on him. Had he so wished, he could have strolled in the thoroughfares. A light and noise, and taken his place among the jousting ranks of those who enjoyed prosperity or struggled for it. He had failed in a more subtle ambition, and for the moment he was heart-sore and disillusioned, and not disinclined to take a certain cynical pleasure in observing and labeling his fellow wanderers as they went their way in the dark stretch between the lamplights. On the bench by the side sat an elderly gentleman who seemed to have lost interest in life. He looked defeated, but refused to admit it. His clothes could scarcely be called shabby, and he belonged unmistakably to that fallen orchestra to whose piping no one dances. As he rose and vanished slowly into the shadows, and his place on the bench was taken almost immediately by a young man, fairly well dressed, but more cheerful of the mien than his predecessor. "You don't seem in a very good temper," said Godspeed, judging that he was expected to take due notes of the demonstration. The young man turned to him with a look of disarming frankness, which put him instantly on his guard. "You wouldn't be in a good temper if you weren't a fix, am I?" he said. "I have done the silliest thing I have ever done in my life." "Yes," said Godspeed dispassionately. "Come up this afternoon, meaning to stay at the Pentagonian Hotel in Berkshire Square. continued the gentleman. When I got there, I found it had been pulled down some weeks ago and a cinema theatre run up on the site. The taxi driver recommended me to another hotel some way off, and I went there. I just sent a letter to council, and then I ran out to buy some soap, as I had forgotten to pack any, and I hate using hotel soap. Then I strolled a bit, had a drink at a bar, and looked at the shore. And when I came to turn my steps back to the hotel, I suddenly realized that I didn't remember its name or even what street it was in. There's a nice predicament for a fellow who hasn't any friends or connections in London. Of course, I can write to my people for the address, but they won't have got my letter till tomorrow. Meantime, I'm without any money. Came out with a shilling on me, which went in buying the soap and getting the drink. And here I am, wandering about with 2 pence in my pocket and nowhere to go for the night. There was an eloquent pause after the story had been told. I suppose you think I have spun you rather than impossible yarn, said the young man with presently, with a suggestion of the resentment in his voice. Not at all impossible, said Godsby judicially. I remember doing exactly the same thing once in a foreign capital, and on that occasion there were 2 of us, which made it more remarkable. Luckily, we remembered that the hotel was on a sort of canal, and when we struck the canal, we were able to find our way back to hotel. The youth brightened at his reminiscence. In a foreign city, I wouldn't mind so much, he said. One could go to one's counsel and get the requisite help from him. Here's one's own land, one is far more derelict if one gets into a fix, unless I can find some decent chap to swallow my story and lend me some money. I seem likely to spend the night on the embankment. I'm glad, anyhow, that you don't think the story outrageously improbable. Okay, now we'll move to the original crux of the story. Well, the story begins with this character, with this man by the name of Norman Godsby. He is the narrator, and through his point of view, he is actually narrating the story. He is giving this kind of dementia that people actually are a victim of, and how people forget sometimes their little things and how troublesome these things turn later on. This is how Saki is trying to tell to the readers, and this person by the name of Godsby is actually the story is seen through his eyes. Okay, Norman Godsby sat on the bench in the park. He sits on a bench in a park at around 36 minutes past 6. Means it was past 6 past. It was 6:30. The time was the evening time, and the season or the month was early March. Dusk had fallen heavily. Dusk is the time when sun is setting, or it has set almost, had fallen heavily over the sea. Means things it's complete. It's the beginning of evening, and the scene is you see something symbolic. It has some symbolic meaning. There was a wide emptiness over the road and sidewalks. People were not in that much rush as normally in the prime of the day. People in the morning, people start coming out from their homes, and there is a good hustle and bustle on the roadside. But this time, people were as if people had been depeopled. The streets, the roads have been depeopled. Dusk had fallen heavily over the sea, means it was the evening time. There was a wide emptiness over roads and sidewalks, and yet there were many figures moving silently. There were some people who were moving, going and to and fro, silently, not making that much of noise, shouting all this, that uncanny sound, that uncanny, what we say, that type of shouting was not, heard through the half light. Or dotted unobtrusively on a bench or chair, or some people without, with that obtrusion, people were taking the bench, the chairs, whatever, scarcely to be distinguished from the shadowed gloom in which they sat. They were in that shadowy gloom, actually hid their faces as it was evening time. You cannot one could not recognize them at some distance, so they were just in their own ivory towers. The scene pleased Godspey and harmonized with the present mood. He was analyzing this time and the mood of the people, and his mood was actually harmonized. He was pleased with this. Dusk to his mind, he had his own connotation. He had his own, thought about the dusk. He was thinking dusk a kind of time that he was relating to the desperity, disappointment. All this was the hour of defeat. He was thinking that the evening time or the dusk time was actually the time of defeat. For him, it was a kind of not defeated. Men and women who had fought and lost. It was for both those who started their day's journey in the morning. Could be distinguished into two categories. People could be divided into two categories. One category or one class of people that he believed would have won the day's struggle, or would have won the day, would have a different complexion, different expression on their faces, and some people who could feel dissatisfied with the day would be people, whom he counts the second category, are the people classed into defeated ones. Okay, then who fought but lost, who hid their fallen fortunes and dead hopes as far as possible from the scrutiny of the kids. These people could be feeling a kind of remorse, a kind of regret. They would be feeling sorry because they could not have gained or won the day. According to him, they would be most unhappy people. Can float in this hour of gloaming. These people who have been defeated all the day, would come to sit somewhere in the gloom and share their defeat with this darkness. So actually, what he wants to say. When their shabby clothes and bowed shoulders and unhappy eyes might pass unnoticed, or at any rate unrecognized. This is the time their expressions, their clothes, their tidy clothes, untidy clothes, or their dirty clothes, or anything that cannot be noticed in this time, because it's already getting evening, and light was not much visible. They were not visible, so there was not such light, so that they could not be recognized at some distance. So they had this, they think this time is, according to him, this time is proper for them to come out from their homes, or to get a kind of rest somewhere, to compare the defeat with the evening, so that they could not be noticed at all. A king that is conquered must see strange looks. So bitter a thing is the heart of a man. Now he is comparing a king who is conquered, who is conquered, who has not conquered anything, but who is himself conquered, sees strange looks, having a different kind of expression on his face. So bitter a thing is the heart of a man. Similar, he is just symbolizing this, metaphorizing these things, that human heart is the king. Sometimes it wins, sometimes it loses, sometimes it's happy, sometimes it's not happy. It's dejected and rejected as well. तो ये क्या बोलता है? So bitter a thing is the heart of a man. The wanderers in the dusk did not choose to have strange looks fastened on them. These people who have lost, who are wanderers, they do not choose, they do not think about their appearance, because they know the time is not convenient to show their appearance, the false appearance. They remain unnoticed because they feel this is the time when nobody is going to see them, fasten on them. Therefore, they came out in this bad fashion. This is again using a compound word, bad fashion. Bad fashion is actually bad fashion. A compound word which means changadar ki chal, means people who come late in the morning, late in the evening, and they start their journey in the evening because they are defeated people, according to him. Beyond the sheltering scene of busyness and palings came a realm of brilliant lights and noisy rushing traffic, marking the hunts of those other people who held the steering of life in their hands and did not give up so easily. And then there is another group of people who just do their manual labor, their hard work, and they remain struggling. They don't give up their struggle so easily as some people get defeated by certain events of time, life. There's another group of people who are easily defeated, and the group of people who are not easily defeated. He's comparing these. He's actually imagining the scene, the local when the story begins, and he's actually analyzing that there are two types of two groups of people: those who are defeated and those who are victorious. So the scene is being created in that sense. Who held the steering of life in their own hands and did not give up so easily. So God's imagination picture things as he sat on his bench in almost deserted walk. God's Bay is similarly sitting somewhere on the bench in a park and just picturing this, imagining in his mind these things and observing, analyzing people. He was in a mood to count himself among the defeated. This time he himself was thinking he was not among the victorious people. He was among the people who are always who have been defeated. Okay. Money troubles did not press on him. This was not something, a big issue to be troubled by money. फिर क्या था? Had he so wished, he could have strolled into the thoroughfare. अगर ऐसा होता तो वो सड़कों पे, चौराहों पे घूम लेता, लेकिन ऐसा कुछ नहीं. ठीक? Of the lights and noise, and taken his place among the jewel-listing ranks of those who enjoyed prosperity or struggled for it, then his position would have been different. He would have taken himself to the jewel-listing ranks of those people who enjoyed prosperity, those people who are prosperous, who are in comfort, who feel a kind of luxurious life and struggle for it, or those who are in a struggle to get it all. He had failed in a more subtle ambition, and for the moment he was heart-sore and disillusioned. He had failed in a more subtle ambition. He had failed in his ambition. Subtle, barik, very tiny, something that's unnoticeable sometimes. And for the moment he was heart-sore. His heart was aching. He was not feeling good at his heart and disillusioned. Now umid sa tha. He was not feeling kind of hope, and not disinclined to take a certain cynical pleasure in observing and labeling his fellow vendors. Then, accordingly, he was, yarding the people. He was measuring the people. He was analyzing the people. Most of the vendors of this time, he was observing them that they all belong to his category as they went their ways in dark stretches between the lamplights, because these people were doing the same thing as he was doing as he sat on the bench and was thinking about himself. From his point of view, every person that who sits somewhere in the evening, somewhere in an isolation or in the parks, are actually the people who get mostly defeated by their, fate or luck, whatever you call it. On the bench by his side sat an elderly gentleman who seemed to have lost interest in life. At the same time, meanwhile, on the bench where he was sitting on, there sat an elderly gentleman, but a bit elderly, who seemed to have lost interest in life. He was having the same position. He was having the same feeling. He was feeling the same trauma, and he was feeling the same torture of life, that he had lost interest in his life. He looked defeated but refused to admit he was a person. He was looking defeated, but he was not acknowledging his defeat. He was not, admitting, or he was not, acknowledging his defeat. Okay, he refused to admit it. His clothes could scarcely be called shabby. He was wearing shabby clothes. From his clothes, it seemed that he was not feeling good at heart, because his clothes were not looking good. And he belonged unmistakably to the forlorn orchestra. For him, this person was not something who could attract people. As he says the phrase, "Who's piping, no one dances." Some person who tries to motivate people, who tries to gain, who tries to win the fame, the money, the luxury, but nobody is going to pay any attention towards him or her. As he arose and went, fairly well dressed but more cheerful of man than his predecessor. Sorry. As he rose and vanished, as he stood up and left the place slowly into the shadows, he slipped in the shadows, and his place on the bench was taken almost immediately by a young man. Then another person who was young than his predecessor, who was sitting next to Godsby, sat on the same bench. Fairly well dressed, he was wearing good dress, but more cheerful of the man than his predecessor. But he was having a kind of cheerfulness on his. He was a bit happy than the man who before him was at the same place where this young person stood. Okay, thank you very much today. Inshallah, tomorrow we'll take up rest of the lesson.